This video covers the Algebra 1 Spring Final Exam Review, questions 31 through 40. Before we start, remember that your review is due before you start the test and is worth 10 bonus points on the final. So again, problems 31 through 40. Problem 31 says the function a equals LW is used to find the area of a rectangle. The rectangle has a width of 6x plus 5 and a length of 2x minus 7. What expression represents the area of the rectangle? So they want me to figure out the area. So remember, up here, area is length times width, which means I need to take 6x plus 5 and multiply it by 2x minus 7. In order to do that, we are going to use the box 6x plus 5, 2x minus 7 on the side. Remember, top versus side, the order does not matter as long as you keep them together. So 6x and 5 need to be together, and the plus needs to go with 5. 2x and minus 7 need to go together, and the minus needs to go with 7. To fill in my box, I do top times side, top times side, top times side, top times side. So 6 times 2 is 12, x times x is x squared. 5 times 2 is 10, and I rewrite the x. 6 times negative 7 is negative 42, and I rewrite the x. 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. So I have 12x squared, a positive 10x, a negative 42x, and a negative 35. That's what the box gave me. From the box, I have to remember to combine my like terms. My 12x squared isn't changing, and the minus 35 isn't changing. It's just that middle term that will change. 10x's minus 42x's is a total of negative 32x's, and I box my answer. So 12x squared minus 32x minus 35 would be my function, or the function to describe my area. Remember that the questions with a plus sign remind you that you might want to use a graphing calculator. So I have mine pulled up. If you need to pause the video to grab one, go ahead and pause it now, but you will want a calculator. So problem 32 says the graph of a quadratic function has x-intercepts at 1, 0, and negative 6, 0. Which function could describe this function? So x-intercepts mean it crosses the x-axis at 1 and negative 6. So 1 and negative 6 would be somewhere over here. So what I'm going to do is put all of these into y equals and look at my graph. So on y equals, I'm typing in exactly what I see. Parentheses x minus 6, close parentheses, parentheses x plus 1, close parentheses. When I graph, this does not cross at negative 6 and positive 1. B is just the opposite signs. So I have a positive 6 and a negative 1, or a minus 1. When I click graph, I can see that this crosses at a negative 6 and a positive 1. So that's most likely my answer. Just to double check, I'm going to take and plug in all the other answers because I have the time. So option C is x squared minus 6x plus 1. That does not cross at negative 6. And x squared plus x minus 6 does not cross at negative 6. So even if we just look to see which one crosses at negative 6, there's only one answer. To look at the domain, because 33 asks us what is the domain of this function, to look at the domain, anytime you want to see a function, I would go to y equals and type in exactly what I have. So I have 3x squared plus 5x minus 4. I click graph to see my graph, and I can see that domain, remember, means x's. My domain is going all the way to the left and all the way to the right, and will keep going on and on and on and on. So my domain would be all reals or infinitely many. You could write it like this, or they might have all reals listed out, or all real numbers. Any of those would be sufficient. You don't have to write them all, but know that they all mean the same thing. Problem 34 says the area of a rectangle is modeled by a of x equals x squared plus 4x minus 60, where x is the width of the rectangle. What would be the width of a rectangle that has an area of 897? So this here, they're giving us an area. They're giving us an a value. So what I'm going to do, what I think most students find is the easiest thing to do, is plug in the equation exactly like I see it. So I have x squared plus 4x minus 60 listed in y equals. Now remember, they're giving me an area, so they're basically giving me a y value, which means all of these are widths, which are x values. So if I go second graph, I can look at the table. So option A is 6 feet. Well, when x is 6, y is not 897. Option B is 18. When x is 18, y is not 897. And I go to C, which is 29. When x is 29, y is 297. Let me just double check. 34 is not 897. So again, when you're given a formula, plug this into y equals, then ask yourself, what am I given? Am I given an x or am I given a y? This time you're given a y, so we need to plug in and use the table. Problem 35 asks for the solution set of 2x squared minus 7x minus 4 equals 0. So I'm going to type this in exactly like I see it, 2x squared minus 7x minus 4, and click graph. So I can see it's crossing right there and right there. Remember, solution set means where does it cross the x-axis. It also means where is y 0. So I can scroll. Oh, look, here's one of them. Let me see if I can find the other one. Uh-oh, the other one is not so nice. If you notice here, the other one is somewhere between 0 and 1 because that's where it goes from negative to positive. So I can see one of them. My solution set is usually listed like this. So one of them, I looked on the table when y was 0, x was 4. For the other one, I need to go find this negative one right here. So I'm going to click second trace, because that really means calculate, and we want the calculator to do the calculating for us. Remember that 0 means the same thing as solution, which means the same thing as x-intercepts, which means the same thing as roots. So I click option 2. It says left bound, so I go to what I want, slide to the left, so I hit the left arrow 3 times, and click enter. Go back to what I want. It says right bound, so I go to the right 3 times, enter, enter. And my other 0 is at negative 0.5. So that is my solution set for a negative 1/2. One of the zeros was found by looking at the table. The other 0 was found by, doing second trace 0 and finding that 0. Problem 36 asks which of these represents the solution to the equation x squared minus 3x equals negative 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is get an equals 0. So I need to add 1 to both sides. So I have x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. Now, when I look at all of my answer choices, these are all in quadratic formula. They all have the square root, which means I need to plug into quadratic formula. The quadratic formula says the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So I'll give you a minute to write that. So my a value is 1, b is -3, c is 1. So the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So that's just me filling in a, b, and c in the formula. Every time I see a letter, I replace it with parentheses and plug in -3 if the letter is b, 1 if the letter is a, or c, or 1 if the letter is c. So the first thing I simplify is that minus minus 2 negatives make a positive. On the bottom, 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm going to go look at my answer choices and see if there's anything I can mark out. For example, A and B do not have positive 3's at the beginning. C and D both have 3 on the top and 2 on the bottom. So now I need to plug in everything that is under my square root except the square root. So under my square root, I have parentheses -3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1. And I have the square root of 5, which is answer choice D. This video will cover 37 through 40, where we are asked to use this graph to answer questions, which is good because we don't have to use a calculator. We just need to know what those vocab words are. So vertex is your highest or lowest point. In this case, if you were to walk up this mountain, it would be where would you be at the very top of the mountain before you had to go down. So that is the point -2, +9. The maximum value just means what is the y value of your vertex. The line of symmetry is always x equals x from your vertex because the line of symmetry goes through your vertex and splits your quadratic function, the picture of it, splits it directly in half. And then lastly for this video, problem 40 asks for your y-intercept. Your y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. It crosses the y-axis at 5, and it could be listed as 5 or the point 0.05.